And I went in there, they had a panel with Reginald Hudlin. And I said, my name is Eric Monte. I created George and Louise Jefferson. Everybody stood up and applauded. I said, I created Good Times. Everybody stood up and applauded. I said, I created What's Happening. Everybody stood up and applauded. I said, I created The Cosby Show. Everybody stood up and applauded. I said, and I wrote the movie Cooley High, and everybody jumped up and cheered. I said, and all those white producers that for all those shows, they're living in Beverly Hills, and I'm living in a homeless shelter on the east side. And everybody got quiet. And this one guy came over to me, because everybody started coming over to me talking. And this one guy came over to me, and he said, my name is Jamar Franklin. He said, any way I can help you, I will. And he was here because he lost everything in Katrina from Louisiana. And this guy, named John Mitchell, was doing a story on him. And he said, do you mind if I tell John Mitchell about you? Because I know he... Norman Lear is a racist, a hypocrite, a thief, and a liar.
This is a man named Eric Monte. He was one of the creators and writers of the Norman Lear show Good Times back in the 70s. He says Norman Lear never properly paid him for his work in creating the show, and that Lear has wrongfully claimed credit for creating a number of shows that were based on characters or ideas that Eric came up with.
I said, if you want somebody funny to own the junkyard, you need to hire Red Fox. And Norman Lear said, Red who? And Norman Lear said, no. This is a white show. 2 months later, he was doing Sanford and Son with Red Fox.
I've always thought it was a little odd that Norman Lear, this Jewish guy from New Haven, Connecticut, could single-handedly create every single groundbreaking television show featuring working-class black families in the 70s. But when I first heard that there was a black man who was accusing Norman Lear of poaching his ideas and not giving him the proper credit, I have to admit, I was a little skeptical.
I had to fight and argue with Norman Lear for 3 years to show a complete black family on television.
Eric Monte, who suffered with drug addiction, homelessness, and eventually lost everything he had, says Norman Lear stole his ideas for shows like Good Times, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, and claimed them as his own, cheating Monte out of creator credits and millions of dollars. But is there any veracity to this claim? I'm Dara Starr Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. I grew up with this Norman Lear mythology. The spiel was that he just somehow had a sense for what America was ready for and had enough knowledge of the black experience to create these shows that reflected our culture and that knocked down racial barriers. He has 5 Emmys, the National Medal of Arts, and the Kennedy Center Honor. Surely there couldn't be any truth to the rumor that he was a thief. Eric Monte, who was born Kenneth Williams, grew up in Chicago's inner city, in the Cabrini Green housing projects to be exact, the very projects where the groundbreaking show Good Times was set. In his estimation, it was a great childhood filled with rich experiences that he wanted to share with the world.
I started looking for some black heroes, and I saw Mantan, Deppy Fetchers, and Amos and Andy, and I thought they were real funny, but I didn't want to be them. In fact, I was ashamed of them. So I made a vow. I grew up, I was going to make some black heroes.
He wanted people to know that his upbringing was about more than just gun violence, drugs, and poverty. So, as soon as he was of age in the late 1960s, he decided to hitchhike to Hollywood. He did whatever he had to do to survive. He gambled, he hustled, he even sold drugs at one point. It took him 2 years to get there. Eventually, he hooked up with a group of hippies and enrolled in LA City College on the GI Bill and studied poetry, which eventually turned him on to screenwriting. He created a bit of buzz in the black artistic community when word spread about one of the plays that he had produced while he was at LA City College. In 1971, Mike Evans, who played Lionel Jefferson in All in the Family, asked Eric Monte if he would be willing to write a spec script for the show that would help him to flesh out his character a bit more.
He said, and I understand you're a good writer. I'd like you to write a show that centers on my character. And I'll put both our names on it, take it into Norman Lear, and we'll split the money. So I said, okay. So I wrote this show in which I created his mother and father, George and Louise Jefferson. And he took it in Norman Lear, and 2 weeks later, Norman sent for me. And that's how it all started.
So, with the script, Eric Monte created the characters George and Louise Jefferson. He pitched the idea of a spin-off show with these characters to Norman Lear for years, but Lear didn't think it would work.
I pitched the show in 1971, And his first thing Norman Lear said when I came into the office was, America will never buy a black man calling white people hunky in a sitcom.
In 1975, Lear finally decided to give the Jeffersons their own show, using many of Monte's suggestions, but he never invited him to be a writer on the show, and he didn't list him in the credits as a creator or offer any residuals for Monte having developed those characters. Eric also says that Norman Lear talked to him about the desire to remake a British TV show, Steptoe and Son, in the early 70s. Eric suggested to Norman that he do it with an all-black cast and use Red Fox as the lead. At the time, Norman Lear didn't even know who Red Fox was, and he had planned to use an all-white cast. But a few months later, the show was green-lighted, and what do you know? He took Eric's suggestion, again with no acknowledgement of his contribution. At the same time, around 1971, Monte was pitching a show to Norman Lear based on his own childhood in the Cabrini Green housing projects in Chicago. Esther Roll was receiving a lot of good buzz at the time for playing Maud's Maid, Florida, and the network decided to give her her own spin-off show. When they came to Norman Lear for ideas, he pitched them Eric's idea for a show set in Cabrini Green. But there was one change that Esther insisted upon.
She wanted a husband on the show. They wanted to do it without a husband. And she said, no, I want a husband on the show because I was raised with a father and a mother, and I wanted America to see that black men stay with their families and raise their children.
Right.
Now, Norman did hire Eric Monte to write for Good Times. Eric describes his time as a writer on the show as being very contentious because he and several members of the cast were in constant battles with the white writers and with Norman Lear about the tone and the stereotypes that were depicted in the show.
I caught hell because Norman Lear was an incredible racist, but he didn't think so. And everything they wrote was stereotypic. They thought of black humor as, yowza boss, I was going to go down by the river. I'd fight them tooth and nail. They'd ignore me in the offices. Take that yowza stuff down to the cast. John Amos, Esther Roll, and Johnny Dubois would have a fit. I would give them what I had written. Norman Lear would reluctantly shoot it, put it on the air, and it became a big hit.
He says after the first season he was demoted as a chastisement for his constant battles with Norman Lear, and the white writers were promoted in his place.
They eventually fired John Amos by killing off his character for the same reason.
After the second season of Good Times, Eric Monte got a deal to write the Cooley High movie, and he left Norman Lear's production company altogether. Eric's movie Cooley High was a breakout hit in 1975, and that prompted ABC head Michael Eisner to call him in to discuss creating a show based on his movie. That show eventually became What's Happening. Eric wrote a pilot for the script, and ABC accepted it. Because he had been burned so badly by Norman Lear, Eric fought for more control this time and wanted to put the show out through his own production company. ABC execs said that because he didn't have any producing experience, they would have to hire a couple of line producers to work with him. Eric Monte's agent, Bernie Weintraub, also repped writer-producers Saul Turtletaub and Bernie Ornstein. When he finally saw the production deal, it was listed under something called Toy Productions.
And I was like, who the hell is Toy Productions? Turtletaub and Ornstein had gone out and formed a company with Bud York and Norman Lear's partner. ABC had signed to do the show with that company, and my agent, Bernie Weintraub, had negotiated the deal, all behind my back.
So Monte went to the Writers Guild to try and get them to mediate the situation. They offered him the bare minimum, which was a huge insult. So he took the only step that he felt was left. He filed suit against all of them: ABC, CBS, Turtletaub, Ornstein, Yorkin, Weintraub, and Norman Lear.
Norman Lear came to me, and he offered me $1 million for a settlement. And I said, for all those shows, no way. So the lawyers came to me and they said, look, take that money because you still have your suit against the networks and the others, but at least we'll get paid. So when the papers came down, all the defendants were listed. So I said, I didn't agree to this. They said, either you take this or we're walking off the case. I went all over Los Angeles looking for lawyers to represent me. I had the evidence and everything, okay? No lawyer in that town would take my case.
This was 3 days before the statute of limitations ran out on the oldest accusations in the suit, so he was forced to take the settlement. After that, he was effectively blackballed in the industry and couldn't get much work. He fell on hard times in the late 90s and developed an addiction to crack cocaine. He eventually ended up at the Salvation Army, where he continued to write scripts that he hoped to have produced. He kicked his drug habit in the early 2000s and is still living. If you think about it, here was this young black kid from the streets, talented but unsophisticated, didn't know how the business worked and just wanted a place at the table. Through sheer talent and grit, grit, he miraculously gets one, but is shortchanged over and over by industry power players. Are there misrepresentations or exaggerations in his story? We'll probably never know, since Norman Lear, who's 99 years old, has refused to respond to any questions about it. Unfortunately, it's not hard to imagine this story playing out exactly as he says it did. What can't be questioned is the indelible legacy that Eric Monte has left on the culture with the characters and stories that he brought us, regardless of whether he will ever receive his proper recognition or not.
I'm the creator of Good Times. Eric Monte.
Okay, for those of you who have been following the Eric Monte story, you know we did a fundraiser to get him into some adequate housing. He's been living in really deplorable conditions after battling homelessness and drug addiction for many years. Well, I am so excited to let you all know that we have finally found a place for him. Thanks to a lot of help from his good friend and advocate, Jamar Franklin. Mr. Monte will be moving into his new place next month. Look at him. He's checking it out. He's going to have a seat. He's happy. The process was slow going because we had to work within his already existing network of social services, the Veterans Administration, Social Security, and so on, just to make sure that he would have access to the services that he needs. But we finally found a place that will provide transportation to and from the VA and will provide him with just enough assistance that he can live independently for years to come. And the money that you all have given has made all of this possible. I can't tell you how happy this makes me. Thanks again to Jamar Franklin for being my boots on the ground during this process. So we'll do another update when he moves in a month or so, but thank you to all of the donors. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are angels.
Hey, big salute, family. This your brother K. Judah, giving all praise to the Most High Yah and faith in Yahshua HaMashiach. I want to thank the Most High and Yahshua for allowing our brother Eric Monte to have a place to lay his head. And I want to thank the sister who did the fundraiser to raise money to get our brother Eric Monte out of the Salvation Army. This man was homeless, but that goes to show you that our people do love each other. What you hear in the media is not the true story. They have you thinking that we all hate one another. But the love and kindness that this sister displayed, and those who rally around her and raise money to get our brother Eric Monte into a nice place for these stages of his life, to comfort ye his soul. I'm not shocked what I heard in the video. You cannot cross the double crosser. You cannot beat Satan better than him at his game. White man created this game. So in the end of his game, the white man always overcome in his game because he came up with the rules. Out of all that Eric Monte did, he never received the credit for all the work that he did, family. He gave us Good Times. He gave us Sanford and Son. He gave us What's Happening. He gave us Cooley High. But they never put this man's names on the credit. Why? Because this is his game. He who controls the media, he who controls the camera, he who controls the pen, gonna always win in the end. So I pray that our brother Eric Monte, this man was on drugs, and nobody can say how a man should move and live if you have not walked in that man's shoes. This was a young man at this time, just trying to come up, coming out of Chicago with gifts and talents that the Most High blessed him with. And they used his gifts and talents, but never gave the credit to the one with the gifts and talents. This is why Gentiles have to make you look dumb. This is why when you're in a room with Gentiles, they have to diminish you because they standing next to greatness. Whether it's our sisters standing next to greatness, whether it's our brothers standing next to greatness, our sons standing next to greatness, our daughters standing next to greatness. That's why they come up with these stereotypes and diminish you on TV because they standing next to greatness. You are none of these things that the media say. You are not violent by birth. You are not wicked by birth. You are not a murderer by birth. They came up with systems to create monsters. But this same system in which you try to create monsters will turn on you one day and be like a young lion running through the streets, and none can deliver. So Eric Monte, I pray, brother, that in these stages of your life, even though you did not reap the rewards on this side, but your recognition by your people and what we know you did would never go unnoticed. When these shows come on, now we can tell our children, black man did this. Good Times, black man did this. Sanford and Son, black man wrote this. Cooley High, black man wrote this. Moving on up, black man came up with all these ideas. How can a Gentile tell our story when he never walked in our shoes? Monte walked in our shoes. He can tell our story. He can tell our experience. He know what we want to see on TV. But this so-called Jewish man, the Bible told us they just thieves and robbers. The wicked have inherited the earth. The wicked, he inherit the earth. They ruling right now. Yeah, the wicked. So you have our people that's sitting at the table in this time. Writers that you will never know. Black people who done came up with some of the most profound ideas known to man, but you would never know their name. Guess why? Because it was taken from them. And this is why I'm saying now before I go. My people, whom I love with a pure heart, whatever you create, don't let your left hand know what your right hand gonna do. And never tell your ideas to Gentiles. Never tell your ideas to Gentiles. They will steal your ideas. That's why you always have to bag up everything with paperwork. And don't you know sometimes that don't even work? Because he who holds the gavel when you go to court, he look just like the one you fighting against. The lawyer look like the judge. So you think they're on your side when really they doing back doors. Eric Monte, not in this life, but the one to come, brother. I say peace and blessings to you. And that the Most High Yah will reward you in the life to come. Blessings, Israel, and big salute.